Hello everyone, welcome back to the World Conflict Monitor. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today we dive into one of the most volatile crises unfolding in Eastern Europe. Belarus in revolt. Army defection triggers nationwide uprising, Lukashenko losing control. This is not a product review in the conventional sense, but we can borrow the framework exterior, interior, performance, safety, unique selling points, price, conclusion metaphorically, to analyze the uprising, regime, and stakes. Let's get into it. When we talk about the exterior, we mean the visible signs, the outward structure, what people on the streets, in the media, and foreign observers see. On the surface, you see mass protests, demands for change, defiance in public squares. You see rural towns and cities rising up, banners with white flags, slogans calling for new elections, cries against police brutality. You see security forces blocking roads, deploying water cannons, tear gas, detaining demonstrators. You see occasional news about soldiers or low-level officers refusing orders, abandoning posts, or in rare cases openly defecting. These visible cracks in the regime's facade are the exterior signs that something more fundamental is shifting. The regime appears brittle at certain points, when armored columns hesitate, when military installations become vulnerable to protester approach, when the regime is forced to deploy loyalist forces more aggressively, or tighten communications censorship. However, on that exterior there is also a mask: state media, tightly controlled television and radio, propaganda discourse claiming the election was legitimate, and the security forces remain loyal. There is intimidation, suppression of independent media, internet shutdowns, arrests of journalists, all part of an effort to maintain that exterior veneer of control. So the exterior is a mix, visible uprising and cracks, and a forced projection of stability. Turning inward to the interior, the deeper structures, beliefs, morale, institutions, loyalties, and fractures. This is where the largest and most critical tensions lie. Inside the regime and inside society, many things are at play. Inside the security apparatus, the loyalty of the military high command, defense minister, interior ministry, and elite forces is crucial. So far, most senior military figures appear to remain aligned with Lukashenko, publicly reaffirming the regime line that the election was legitimate. But defections or resignations at lower or mid-levels have started to emerge. Some officers, soldiers, or police have refused orders or fled. In particular, defections previously prevented Belarus from fully joining the war in Ukraine. The regime's survival hinges on whether deeper layers of the state, intelligence services, security organs, elite guard units, will hold or falter under pressure. In society, the interior includes the frustrations of ordinary people, decades of stagnating economy, corruption, repression, lack of freedoms, suppressed dissent. The protests since 2020 and ongoing partisan resistance reflect a growing undercurrent of resentment and political consciousness. That interior pressure is gradually being translated into more confrontational behavior. Strikes, sabotage, cyber actions, railway disruptions, acts of defiance by infrastructure workers. The opposition and partisan networks have also grown in clandestine capacity, organizing cells, communicating over encrypted channels, coordinating decentralized actions. Another interior factor is belief and morale, whether rank-bound, while security personnel believe in the regime or fear consequences of defection, whether protesters believe their movement can win, whether foreign powers or regional actors choose to support one side covertly or overtly. These interior factors are the latent energies that can either push the regime to collapse or allow it to cling on by repression. Thus, while the exterior shows protests and defections, the interior is what truly defines sustainability, the loyalty of core institutions, the resilience of opposition networks, the morale and belief systems deep within the state and society. When we consider performance, we mean how the regime and the uprising alike are executing under stress, how they respond to crises, how they manage resources, timing, coordination, and adaptability. In this metaphorical performance section, we look at how well each side is moving. The uprising's performance has been uneven but notable. They have maintained persistence over months despite crackdowns, mass arrests, and force. That shows organizational resilience. Protesters have adapted tactics, smaller gatherings, flash mobs, decentralized protests, digital mobilization, civil disobedience. The Belarusian partisan movement continues sabotage, cyber attacks, infrastructure disruption. They have shown capacity to endure state pressure, to shift tactics, to avoid being fully crushed. On the regime side, its performance has relied heavily on coercion, detentions, intimidation, blocking internet, violence, propaganda. This works to suppress momentum in many places, but in some areas it underperforms, when it cannot prevent a protester from reaching a government building, or when armored vehicles do not push through, or when security forces hesitate. The regime has struggled to fully isolate opposition, to prevent defections, to maintain total cohesion in its security organs. A prime test of performance is in a moment of crisis. If a major unit defects, or if a major city rises up and security forces refuse to fire, the regime must manage the fallout. So far, full-scale military defection has not happened in a way that topples the regime. But the fact that this question is even being posed, army defection triggering nationwide uprising, is a sign that performance under pressure is under stress. Next, safety features. In a political conflict metaphor, safety features are the buffers and safeguards each side has against collapse, backlash, or escalation. What protective mechanisms or fallback strategies exist for regime or opposition? For the regime, safety features include loyal guard units, security services that remain intact, surveillance and intelligence networks to preempt dissent, the ability to imprison or eliminate key opposition, media control, alliances with external powers, notably Russia. The regime can also crack down violently, shut down infrastructure, restrict communications. These are safety valves intended to suppress escalation. Further, the regime can attempt to co-opt moderate forces, offer limited concessions, negotiate with some opposition elements, or scapegoat external interference to rally nationalist support. For the uprising and opposition, safety features include decentralized structure to avoid decapitation, broad social support across urban and rural areas, international attention that raises cost to regime repression, clandestine networks to survive in clandestinity, nonviolent tactics that reduce legitimacy costs for the state, and fallback plans to disperse and reassemble. Also, moral legitimacy. If the regime uses excessive violence, protesters gain sympathy and external support. A robust diaspora and exile leadership can help in preserving momentum if domestic space is suppressed. Thus, both sides have safety features meant to absorb shocks and prevent total failure, but the balance may shift as the conflict deepens. Let's talk next about unique selling points. In this metaphor, the unique strengths or advantages each side brings to the table, what makes their cause compelling, what assets they hold that the other lacks. For the uprising/opposition side, key unique selling points are moral legitimacy, popular support, momentum, narrative of change, aspirational appeal to freedom and democracy. The protest movement, despite repression, has shown resilience and adaptability, which is a unique competitive advantage over a regime reliant on brute force. The fact that defection is even considered shows a potential edge. If any significant portion of military or police switch sides, that tipping point could cascade. The opposition's decentralized structure makes it harder for the regime to crush the entire movement with one strike. International sympathy and media attention also multiply their voice beyond Belarus. On the regime side, its unique selling points are control of coercive tools, access to state media and propaganda machinery, control over security services, administrative structures, and the ability to enforce punishments harshly. It also often has external backing or strategic support from Russia, which acts as a lifeline and deterrent against regime collapse. The regime's unique advantage is inertia. The apparatus of state is already in place, it's harder to dislodge, and existing institutions may resist change. Also, the regime can make credible threats or exploit fear to suppress weaker parts of the movement, so its unique proposition is force and institutional weight. Next is price, which in our metaphor means the cost each side pays and may be forced to pay. Human costs, infrastructure damage, legitimacy loss, sanctions, fragmentation, backlash, regime collapse, or civil conflict. For protesters and society, the price is high. Lives lost, injuries, arrests, torture, exile, broken families, economic disruption, infrastructure damage, disruption to normal life, potential internal fracture or radicalization. If escalation becomes full-scale conflict, the country could suffer devastation and instability. The price also includes potential backlash, reprisals, and the danger of falling into civil war or authoritarian collapse worse than the status quo. For the regime, the price is also steep: loss of legitimacy, defections, weakening control, potential overthrow, international isolation, sanctions, diplomatic costs, loss of allied support. If the regime fails, elite figures may face prosecution or retribution. The cost of heavy repression also accumulates. The more brutality is used, the more resentment, the more backlash. A tipping point could render regime survival impossible, and then the price is total loss of power. Thus the price is a balancing act. How much each side is willing to pay, how far they can push before negative returns dominate. To conclude, is Lukashenko losing control? The evidence suggests he is under serious pressure. The exterior shows real signs of revolt and cracks in the regime's facade. The interior, however, still leans toward regime survival. Senior military and security elites largely remain loyal for now. The performance of the uprising is competent and adaptive. The regime's safety features are strained. The opposition holds moral high ground and momentum as unique selling points. The regime holds the instruments of coercion. The price is rising for both. If a major military unit defects or refuses to follow orders, we may witness a cascade. The tipping point is not guaranteed yet, but the trajectory is precarious. Lukashenko's control is contested more than ever. Unless he can reinforce loyalty in the core, suppress dissent decisively, or negotiate some stable compromise, the chances of losing control increase. My final assessment: we are witnessing a critical juncture. The regime is not yet overthrown, but it is no longer stable and unassailable. The uprising's success depends on defectors, cohesion, sustained support, and whether the state can respond with enough force to blunt momentum. Watch the loyalty of key security institutions closely. If they fracture, the game changes rapidly. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like, turn on notifications, and follow along as we continue monitoring developments in Belarus and beyond.